Hello, viewers. It is Halloween. You know what this means. A Halloween special. Because, this is a horror channel, and the Pumpkin King told me so. Anyway, this is a list of creepypastas that I find quite scary, and are perfect for this time of year. Do not expect to find creepypastas like Jeff the Killer, Sonic.exe, or Slenderman, but instead, creepypastas that are brilliantly written or underrated. Keep in mind, this is my opinion, so take this with a pinch of salt. Also, links of course will be in the description below. Without any further ado, let's begin. This story starts off as an email to another person, simply known as Bree. It talks about how a promising figure skater known as Nora Petrova found a Wikipedia page after Googling herself. The page seemed to accurately predict outcomes of her skating competitions, such as any of her wins. She wanted a chance at the Olympics so badly, she altered her Wikipedia page to change the outcomes of the sectionals. However, instead of displaying what she put, it said Nora is a selfish little bitch who's going to get what she deserves. She was banned from competitions after being accused of sabotaging the other players' skates. It should be noted that Wikipedia was unaware of this page, as it appeared that Nora was the only one who had access to it. The page altered itself and displayed that she was a pathetic little orphan, just before getting a call saying that her parents are dead. She moves to Switzerland after getting a settlement from her parents, and abandons her habit of checking the page. That is, until she tries out for the ice circus. When she checks the page, however, it says that she dies today. A student goes to school one day, shortly before winter break was set to begin. He finds that class has not started when it was supposed to, so he gets up to try and find other students. After finding no one, he finds a paper saying, "Dear students, tomorrow there will be no school due to a huge blizzard effect. Enjoy your winter break." The author claimed to have never heard anything about a blizzard. The author decided to walk home, but was stopped by what appeared to be a child. The author called out to the child, but it started to run into a barber shop that the child found very nostalgic. When entering there was crying heard from upstairs. It was the child. The child was seen holding a doll of a person named Jake. The doll then spoke, saying, "Don't you remember Jake? You used to play with me. Remember? We had so much fun until you left me behind in that attic." The doll then proceeds to torment the author, but eventually they escape with the help of a dead young boy. The story ends 10 days later, with the author recalling who Jake was, and that he used to love playing in the attic. Our author tells us that while working at a gas station, the new guy starts working there, named Jeremy. Him and his boss start off thinking that he's creepy, but he's clearly never been a problem. That is, until a lot of things start to disappear. His boss pays him to look and review the security tapes to see why things are going missing. And while checking the tapes, he noticed that the same people kept coming back in and buying the same thing, and this goes on for 2 hours. The author eventually finds out something interesting about Jeremy. The fact that he can manipulate time, and that they're all trapped in a time loop. Sort of like the movie Groundhog Day, except a whole lot more creepy and set in a gas station. People in suits make our main character sign papers and disregard what they just saw. And they are forever trapped in the endless time loop. This person works at a small publisher that has not been disclosed at all in the story. They start off by saying that many people simply overlook this company, and therefore they have no idea who they are. One day out of the blue, they get a random call from an old man who claims to have photos that are supposedly anomalies. This person insists that the photos get sent for photocopying one at a time and wait until one comes back before sending another. They one day have someone who wants to buy all the photos, and they eventually give them to him after some lawsuit BS. All the photos were not to be revealed to the public with the exception of a few. All the photos had certain terrifying incidents linked to them, like this one on screen right now, the last known inside photo of Lakeview School in Collinwood before it was consumed by a fire on March 4th, 1908. This is a story I've actually narrated before, but it is too good to not include. The story starts off with a warning that says, "Before you read or listen to this, make sure you are alone. If you are in a room, close the door. If you're by a window, look outside and make sure there is no one there. The only way others should know about the story is by reading it or listening to it themselves. Do not repeat this out loud to anyone. He will hear you. But you are able to read it to yourself or record yourself. Right now, these are the only two exceptions I know about. Once you think you are alone, look at the screen, and do not take your eyes off until you are finished reading or listening to a recording. He will know if you look away." This person is talking about him and his girlfriend looking for creepypastas to listen to on YouTube while main character's parents are out. They were just about to quit until they found a video called "The Man Who Looked Down." They clicked on it and watched it for a while, even though the man did nothing. But our main character's father bursts into the room, and when the main character looks away, the girl shrieks and the man moves. The next day, the woman disappears, so our main character goes to look for her. When he goes inside her house, he finds his girlfriend and the man. The girlfriend was covered in blood, and all she was able to let out before being devoured to death was, "I'm sorry." The main character tries to run, but it gets pounced on. He starts to get devoured, but topples it down the stairs. He escapes and wakes up in a hospital a few days later. He finds out his father went missing and his car was in a ditch. And that's to say that the story ends with our main character hearing breathing on his shoulder. This is the only ritual pasta on this list, and it's about a village that no human has lived at in 200 years. You can only find it on foot by walking through a forest deep in the English countryside. When you get out of the forest, you will be at the edge of the village, but modern devices will disappear until you go back and you're not allowed use of any weapons, or you will die. One wrong move along the way can lead to your inevitable death because there is someone watching you. You must keep moving until you find a well in the center. Toss in a 1 pence, 2 pence, 10 pence, 20 pence, and 50 pence coins, as well as a sample of your blood. Do not leave the well. 5 minutes later, a large figure will come to you. Do not run. He will put his hand out to you, and you must shake it. If you shake his hand, you will feel a surge of power before passing out. You will awaken after a certain amount of time back in your bed. Cured of all diseases, more attractive, and you are now immortal. You are given a deed to the village, and time stops outside the village while you're there, and it will return to normal when you leave. This is another story I have narrated on this channel before. This is about an adopted boy living with a loving mother and sister, as well as a strict father. The father always favored his own child over him, no matter what he did. One night, a few intruders came in and murdered his adopted mother and father. They dragged his adopted sister outside, and they smiled at him with a crooked grin as they pat him on the head, and they slam the door on the main character. He stares down at his own paws, not knowing what to do, and said that if this would be different, if he could only open doors. This is a supposedly cursed image of a husky with a huge, human-like grin. It is said that if you are sent this image, you must spread the word within 3 days, or the image will turn more demonic and haunt you. Sometimes it could lead to insanity, hallucinations, suicidal thoughts, and even death. A woman by the name of Mary E. committed suicide after a reporter visited her house to discuss the image. Also, keep in mind that she was haunted by this image for 15 years. This is a long series of creepypastas, where the main character wants to relive the memories and get another copy of Godzilla for the NES. After a bit of playing, he finds a lot of weird enemies and random creatures, including the one you see on screen right now, known as Red. This story is rather long, so I'm simply just going to leave the story right here in order to avoid any spoilers. A man arrives at a hotel and checks in at the front desk. The reception desk worker tells the man that there will be a door with no number on it, and that he must never go in it. The author finds this odd, but he decided to listen to the instructions anyway. Curiosity did eventually get the better of him, and then he looked through the keyhole. He saw a woman dressed in all white facing away from him. She turns toward him, so he creeps back to his room, as he didn't want to disturb her. The next day he looks through again, but only sees a deep shade of red. He just shrugged it off and thought that the woman suspected that he was spying on her, so she blocked it. When asking the receptionist about it, she asked if he looked through the keyhole. She explains that a man murdered his wife in there a long time ago. She's white literally all over, except her eyes, which were a deep blood red. This episode of SpongeBob SquarePants starts off with SpongeBob and Patrick annoying Squidward as usual, to which he tells him to go away, as he has a concert to prepare for that night. Then it cuts to the concert, and everyone in the audience had what everyone calls hyper-realistic eyes. Everyone kept booing him and walking out. It cuts to Squidward sitting on his bed, sobbing. Random images of dead children with their insides spilling out flash on screen rapidly. There's a loud wind sound playing. He then pulls out a gun, and a demonic voice tells Squidward to do it. Squidward then points at his mouth and pulls the trigger, where then the episode ends. This creepypasta is incredibly popular, and it was even recently directly referenced in this clip of the SpongeBob episode, SpongeBob in Random Land. This was an episode made in the 1930s that shows Mickey Mouse walking down an endless street. The music in the background sounded like someone banging on the piano keys randomly, and Mickey looked super depressed as he was walking. This goes on for a few minutes until the screen cuts to black, which, at the time, people assumed was the end of the video. There was actually more to this, which was found a few years ago. Screams can be heard, the screen gets distorted, Mickey starts to smirk. Viewing this full video is said to cause depression, paranoia, and yes, they're committing a suicide. A security guard once committed suicide after watching this the whole way through. Before dying, though, he said, real suffering is not known. I am going to play a small section of it, and if you don't wish to see it, skip to this time. Still here? Well, turn your speakers down now, and here we go. Russian researchers in the 1940s kept 5 political prisoners / World War II state enemies awake for 15 days, using an experimental gas. Everything went fine for the first 5 days, but then it escalated into a predicament. Subjects developed paranoia, screamed loudly, and one even ripped out his vocal cords. On the 14th day, they decided to open the chamber, but they claimed they did not want to be freed. Instead, they turned off the gas and replaced it with fresh air. 3 of them begged for the gas to be turned back on. And the subjects began eating each other and attacked one of the guards after they entered the chamber. After a few more failed ideas, one of the soldiers proceeded to shoot the last of the subjects. However, when he aimed at the last one, he asked, "What are you? I must know." The subject simply smiled and replied with,
"Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go into the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread."
The guard then shoots him, and the subject's last words are, a group of hackers, simply known as the Cardinals, decided to test the theory that taking a picture of someone captures their soul. They used certain files called Cradle.avi, Needles.mp3, and BurningMan.jpg. After tinkering with the files, they then decided to find binary DNA by linking together these files. These files that were also used were the previously mentioned SmileDog.jpg and SuicideMouse.AVI, as well as Barbie.avi, and even rumored to go as far as the Grifter video. After successfully finding matches, they got 7 different files, and they decided to name them after themselves: Lust, Gluttony, Greed, Envy, Sloth, Wrath, and Pride. After lining the files up, they got a new file called BarelyBreathing.exe, and they committed the sin of trying to run the file. When their corpses were found with the flash drive, it was taken, and it is said that anyone who views the file is killed mysteriously. The author remembers certain memories of this creature who would visit him when he was sick. He was described as looking like a Furby, but with a huge smile, and he was a whole lot more fluffy. He went by the name Mr. Widemouth, and he tried to get the author to jump out the window and juggle knives, but the author did not think that these were good ideas. Eventually, Mr. Widemouth showed him a special trail where he takes all of his little friends. He was supposedly not ready to go down there yet. When the author returned as an adult, he felt that Mr. Widemouth's presence did not exist. So he went down the trail, and he saw that it led to a children's graveyard. The house that he lived at then burned down years later, implying that Mr. Widemouth caught another victim. I mentioned this one before in my top 10 most brilliantly written creepypastas, but I figured it was so scary that I just couldn't justify leaving it off. Our author describes himself as a bad kid who went from foster home to foster home within the big city of Detroit. That is, until he is eventually left with only 2 choices: military school, or the Ronald McDonald house. And we all know which one he picked. This particular house cannot be found by looking for it. It has no sign above the door and it has no windows. You can only find it if you're taken there. The story goes into detail about how people who are sent there get tortured and made into food that you would usually get at McDonald's. And considering human remains have been found in McDonald's as food before, the story could in fact be true. This is my most recent creepypasta reading on my channel, so it was a no-brainer to be put on here. An oil spill happens that causes wildlife to start going crazy and attacking cleanup volunteers. Eventually, cleanup volunteers also started to go as crazy as the animals. This was not far from what you would picture in the zombie apocalypse, and the nation issues an alert. This story in particular is about a person who bars his entire place because the zombies have come for him. So eventually he locks himself in his bathroom, while the undead whisper things like, "We've come for you, and it won't be so bad." He ends the story by saying he doesn't know what to do anymore, as it has already been 2 days. He does, however, consider opening the door, as he thinks that maybe it won't be so bad. This is the final story on this list that I've actually narrated before. A couple of teens find a wheelchair in the creek and they decide to pull it out. They are for some reason drawn to it, but they head back home for a bit, as the author's hand started to itch. They head back a while later and find that it's covered in a weird pus-like liquid, not far from what you would see in a zit. They leave again, but this time they did not come back. 2 weeks later, the author's friend said that someone kicked it back in again, so they had the bright idea to pull it out again. When they pull it out, they find a corpse with no facial features, but the face had empty, black sockets. They run away, but they decide to come back later with filming equipment. When they got it there, they found it gone. So they went back, only to find it blocking the tunnel that led to the author's friend's house. They fall in the creek trying to get away and regroup at his friend's house. The story ends with the author sitting in a chair and thinking that the chair he was sitting in would only be nice if it had wheels. This is a very long story about a person who is questioning his own reality. He starts to go insane as he has been deprived of human contact and needs to figure out who to trust. He finds a lot of random messages throughout the story, like, "Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them, they." After a whole roller coaster of emotion, there is a really interesting plot twist that made my jaw drop. I will not spoil it because it is one of, if not the best plot twist in creepypastas ever. If you wish to read it, I will leave a link below in the description to the story. I'm pretty sure we all had that one teacher at school that everyone absolutely loved. The teacher that was not afraid to swear every once in a while. The teacher in this story, Mr. Mays, is just that kind of teacher. And one Halloween, he tells the students a story from his childhood. Him and a few friends were in Broken Bow, Nebraska one time, in a random barn. They go down a cellar, down a long hallway, with a lot of dim and spaced out light bulbs to light the way. At the end of the hallway, they find a door. After opening it, the lights flickered and they saw something terrifying. The author goes to this place many years later, and they find the same long hallway in the same barn. When opening the door that was from Mr. Mays' story, they saw exactly what Mr. Mays saw. A child. He was scarily thin, and he started dashing toward him at a speed that's impossible for someone like that, or any human in general. After running away and leaving the place, the story ends with the author wanting to find more info in order to figure out if what he saw was really real. This image is a screenshot taken from a bootleg of the episode of Spongebob, Dumped. Aside from the screenshot, there was a lot of static, random flashing colors, and cries in the background. The tape was found by 5 teenagers outside an abandoned mental institution. Of these 5 individuals, 2 committed suicide, 1 went missing, and 1 won't comment on the tape, as well as the last one handing it in to the authorities without hesitation. And it is said that those who stare at this image long enough claim to see SpongeBob blink. This story is super short, so I'm simply going to read this whole thing here. There was a hunter in the woods, who, after a long day of hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay here for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around inside the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls domed by several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted in looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concealed effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the hunter awoke. He turned blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows. A group of people on a forum start discussing a show that they used to watch known as Cove. The more they remember about this weird show, the more they figure out how messed up the show really was. They talk about the terrifying villain known only as the Skin Taker. And then, of course, there's the screaming episode. The episode where every character except the laughingstock ship is screaming while the little girl Janice is crying. The story ends with one of the users asking his mother if she remembers Cove. The mother then said that when he would say that he would go watch Cove, he would switch the TV to static and watch it for 30 minutes. This is a text message story between 2 people with the usernames McDavie and Andy96. Annie starts hearing footsteps outside, and when she goes to look, she sees a silhouette of what looks like David. The man is digging a hole, but then looks up at Annie. He looks exactly like David, but he smiles at her before entering the house. David then tells Annie to hide somewhere, and that's when David calls the police, and the mysterious man tries to find Annie in there. David, of course, swears that it's not him. And after Annie said that the footsteps stopped after a few minutes, she asked David to stop by tomorrow. However, when David asked if it was really her, she went offline. If you people know me incredibly well, then I'm sure you can easily guess what number 1 on this list will be. This is a really brilliantly written creepypasta, and you should read it if you haven't already. But without further ado, the number 1 spot on this list goes to... This story is my all-time favorite creepypasta. An amazing campfire story. An amazing story much like with portraits. An old woman used to live with her husband until he died under mysterious circumstances. So now she lives with a caretaker. One day, however, a detective gets a call from an old woman. I'm from the old woman, saying that her caretaker is dead and that she needs help. When the detective got there, he found the old woman in a wheelchair at the top of the stairs, and the caretaker dead at the bottom, vocal cords ripped out, and sitting in a pool of blood. The detective decides to search the first floor but finds nothing. So he asks the old woman if he could search the second floor. She's hesitant, but he searched anyway, and he leaves no stone unturned. When he entered the final room, the master bedroom, he froze in fear, not by what was in there, but by what wasn't. There was no phone anywhere on the second floor. There was no cell service there. After hearing a noise, he dashed back to the hall, and all he found was an empty wheelchair. And there you have it. This was my list of the top 25 creepypastas. A video that I've been wanting to do for a while but never got around to doing. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments below. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, you should consider subscribing. It's a thing you could do, but you don't have to. I do hope to see you all in the next video. And I want you guys to have a safe and happy Halloween from me and the Pumpkin King.